Hello beautiful creative friends, it's Belinda and I'm back with another process video to share with you today. Now this is another one which I've had some footage that's been on my computer for a while from when I was on the Cut to You design team, and it's using the Quilted Heart cut file. I did something a little bit different with this one. As you can see, I played around with the cut file in my Silhouette Studio software, released the compound path so that I could turn the outside into some stitching holes. And if you're not sure how to do that, I will link a video above now which shows you how I do that in my Silhouette Studio software. So by doing that, what it meant is that rather than cutting the whole file out, I was able to cut those quilted hearts into my background with the pierced holes for stitching, and then I have just done some hand stitching around the edge of each of those hearts. So what you saw me do there was just add a little bit of Heidi Swap gold color shine splashed around the background just to add a little bit of extra sparkle to that background. And now I am ready to start building my layout. So that white cardstock background that you see with the hearts cut out of it, it is trimmed down to I think probably about 11.5 inches by 11.5 inches. So I'm going to mat the entire thing onto a piece of patterned paper. But before I do that, I'm going to back each of these hearts with some patterned paper. So the collection that I'm using here is the crepe paper Fresh Bouquet. It's a really pretty floral, quite muted color layout. And it's really pretty. So I've just chosen a few papers from the 6x8 paper pad, and I'm going for, that really soft muted color scheme. The photo that I am using is one of my husband and I. It was taken at a little family photography session that we had quite a number of years ago now, which was actually where he proposed and asked me to marry him. So I've still got lots of photos from that little photo session that I haven't done anything with. So I'm slowly making my way through them. To back each of these little hearts with the pattern paper, I wanted to add a little bit of dimension so that there's a bit of a shadow behind each of them. I know that my stitching is going to add a little bit of dimension anyway because it does pop out a little bit from the background. So initially I thought that I would need to add some of that foam tape, but it was just a little bit too bulky. So I thought I'd just give it a go using the stitching as my way of adding dimension. And so I'm just going to try that now, and I think I'm pretty happy with it. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere all of these down. So I'm just making sure that I'm adding a really good dollop of wet adhesive to the stitching, the back side of each piece of stitching, and then popping the patterned paper down on top of it. And to cut that pattern paper out, I just roughly measured the width of each of those hearts and then trimmed them down. So that's all done. I'm really happy with that. It has that little stitching. It has lifted the white paper, the white background off each of those pieces of pattern paper just enough to give it a little bit of visual interest without adding too much bulk. So I knew that I wanted to distress the edges of my background here, and I have learnt through experience that I should do my distressing before I take it over to my sewing machine, because I almost always add a stitch border around my backgrounds, but it's just way too hard to try and distress those edges after I've done the stitching. So now I use my little distressing tool. That one is from Tim Holtz. I rough up the edges as much as I can before I take it over to my sewing machine. Then when it does go around the sewing machine, it flattens it out a little bit, but it's easy enough to use my fingers or one of my little tools to lift those up and rough them up again. Before I add the stitching to the border, I'm just going to add some pattern paper behind my photo, so that's it there. I'm just using some papers from the 6x8 paper pad. I try to use up scraps wherever I can, so I've just added that behind the photo. Now jumping around to where I've stitched around the border and roughed up those edges again, so that's beautiful and textured now. just got a single layer of pattern paper behind the photo. I'm not doing too many layers because I want the standout feature of this layout to be those hearts. So I have added some foam tape to the back of the photo. This is a foam tape that I buy in a gigantic roll from Bunnings, which is a hardware store here in Australia. It's quite cheap, much cheaper than buying like a purpose-made scrapbooking product, and the one that I purchase is actually acid-free, so I don't have to worry about it impacting my photos or my layouts over time. Because I do have that little bit of mixed media on the background, and because I've got the stitching, I am adding just a tiny bit of wet adhesive to the foam, and that just allows it to sort of sink in between the stitches, which helps it to adhere a little bit better. My title is this die cut piece. This is quite a large die cut that came in the ephemera pack, and it's a gold foiled that says love, and so that's what I'm using. Now, as I said, this photo came from a photo shoot where I suppose the highlight of that photo shoot was it's where my husband decided to propose. So I've got a lot of photos with not a lot of stories to tell. So what I end up doing is jumping online and just searching for a quote, which is something that I like to do, where I've got layouts where I want to scrap the photo, but I don't necessarily have a big story to go along with it. So that's what I've done here. And you will see me add my journaling in just a moment. The quote that I grabbed is from Audrey Hepburn, who always had such lovely things to say. I think it's something like the best thing to hold on to in life is each other. And I thought that was really sweet for the photo and the way that we're standing together. Now, I'm going to do a little bit of embellishing. Some of these florals I have fussy cut out from the pattern papers, but also in the collection there were these acetate butterflies, and I wanted to add a few of these acetate butterflies around the layout. Again, it just adds a little bit of a whimsical, a soft feel, but because they are acetate, they're a little bit tricky to try and adhere down. Obviously, I didn't want any adhesive showing through. So in a moment, you'll see what I do to solve that problem. I was just fussing around with the foam stickers. For whatever reason, those foam stickers that came in this collection, I just can't really make them work. They're a little bit too bulky for my style. The other thing that I'm tucking in here are some die cut leaves, which is from a little metal die that I have. I've got quite a few different leaf dies, metal dies, and I find that just cutting them out, using them with some plain white cardstock just adds a really soft and subtle little detail that I can tuck in behind embellishment clusters, whether they are floral based embellishment clusters or not. These little pieces of foliage of leaves, they go in quite well because they are really delicate and they are really pretty. So I'm trimming some of them down just to make it a little bit easier to tuck them in. And now I'm going to get started on these butterflies. So I was pretty sure that there was a plastic film over the top of them. So I just used my little tool there to remove the back of that. And then I'm running away to my sewing stash. I've got this little foam piercing mat that I've popped underneath, and then I'm going to grab a piercing tool. In fact, I might even use this little pokey tool, and I'm just going to pierce a couple of holes through the body of the butterfly once I decide where it's going to go. That does go down there. Grab my piercing tool. I'm just going to pierce a couple of holes, 2 holes through the body, 3 holes through the body, and then off camera I've taken it and grabbed some black twine. I don't know if you can see it there, but I have just used some black embroidery thread, and stitched those down to the page. So that was a really fantastic way of getting those adhered, and it also keeps the movement in the butterfly wings. Because that acetate is quite stiff, I could fold it up and they'll stay sort of lifted, and it's a really pretty way of adding a little bit of extra texture and dimension to the layout. So I'm going to come in now with some embellishing. As usual with my layouts, there's a bit of hemming and hawing and not quite sure, do I want it to go here, do I want it to go there, but I think I try and I don't think I do too badly on this layout. So I am adding some foam to the back of some of these pieces just to help them, to give them a little bit of dimension. But the foam dots that I'm using, they are really low profile. I've got lots of different types of foam adhesives. Some are quite thick, others are quite thin, and I just alternate according to how thick my layout is getting and how many layers I'm using and where I want them to go. So for these ones, I think I'm mostly using the really low profile dots and just trimming them down where I need to. So that was a sweet little floral piece there. I thought it would be nice to tuck it into the title. So my embellishing is kind of going on a diagonal. It's starting to the top right of the photo there, and it's kind of moving diagonally across the page down to the bottom left. But still, those stitched hearts really do stand out as the feature of this layout, and I just think they're so pretty. It's such a nice way to use a cut file a little bit differently. I'm going to add a couple more butterflies. These are just from the cardstock stickers, and I'm adding the dimension to the wings with these by using some little foam squares, and then I'll add some wet adhesive just to the inside of the body and just really push down the inside and not the outside too much, but the foam does help to keep the butterfly leaves standing up, and it sort of looks like they're flying around across the page. So I'm going to play around with adding a few more little bits and pieces. What you don't see me do off camera, but you will see in the close-up photos that are coming shortly, is I do go in and add some Nuvo drops, of course. I add a couple of coloured Nuvo drops around my embellishment clusters, and then I give each of the butterflies a little trail using just some clear Nuvo drops, which is, yeah, a really fun and whimsical little detail. So I do hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you have, I'd love for you to go ahead and give me a comment or leave me a thumbs up. And if you're not already subscribed, I would love for you to hit that subscribe button and join me on my paper crafting adventures. I'll leave it there for now and say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day.